So good to see you. So good to see you. So good to be here with you. Wow, I've got the camera on the wrong side, so that's going to be interesting. I put the camera on the wrong side, but that's how we're going to do it. We're going to do a show aimed at the camera on this side rather than the other side. But that's okay. That is all right. It's so good to be here with all of you. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Please hit the notifications bell. I'll have to have my eyes moving back and forth. I wonder, now, let's see if it lets me do this. I'm going to try and turn it here. But it might not let me. But let's see if it lets me. Let's see if it's got the orientation locked. Nope, it's not going to let me turn it, but that's okay. That's all right. We will survive. All right, that's how it's going to roll. So I'm going to look at the camera, and then I'll look at your chats, and then I'm looking at the chat. That's how it's going to roll. All right, well, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Always a pleasure to interact with all of you. We are going to have a great time today and tomorrow and the next day because I am going to do something that I have not done before. And this is a bit of an algorithmic experiment. I am going to see how the algorithms tolerate this. I am going to go live twice today. I'm going to do another live tonight, late, and I'm going to go twice tomorrow, and I'm going to go twice. On Sunday. And let's see how that works. Let's see if the algorithms just kill us. They might just kill us. They might just kill us, the algorithms, or they might love it. Let's see. It's an experiment, but we're going to close out the month of October, the last 3 days of October with boom, boom, boom. That's how we're going to do it. Getting ready for a trip to Nicaragua. Exciting stuff, folks. Very, very exciting. So that's how we're going to do it. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. I'm going to give my opening remarks, and then as I'm doing that, I'll be writing your super chats down. And then I'll answer your super chats in the second half of the show. That's how we do it. So if you have a super chat, just shoot it my way, and I will write it down. And away we go. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, tweet this out. Wherever videos are posted, wherever things are, and you can tweet out the topic, because for my opening remarks for this first live of today, we will be discussing the Rocky Horror Picture Show, it's Halloween time, right? This is Halloween, it's October, and because the Rocky Horror Picture Show is a very, very important work of art, the film came out in 1975, the stage musical was produced in 1973, still wildly popular. I will be giving a political analysis of the Rocky Horror Picture Show, and I will be giving you my unique political analysis of it. So that's how I will do my opening remarks. So tweet this out, bring the audience here, and then after that, I'll just answer your super chats, and then we'll be done, and then I'll be live later tonight. I'll probably do around 11 p.m. tonight, maybe a little bit, maybe even 11:30. There we go. All right, so hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell, and now let's jump into it. Folks, I think that Rocky Horror Picture Show, if you really get to the essence of what it is saying, is profoundly right-wing, profoundly conservative, and profoundly what you might call traditionalist. Profoundly traditionalist. Now, you have to understand. Now, I want to get this right out of the bat as I say that, because a lot of people are hearing that and they're thinking, they're rolling their eyes and they're saying, Caleb, how in the world, VA governor election, how in the world can you think that Rocky Horror Picture Show is conservative? Well, first of all, I want to point out that I know that people who like it, people who liked it at the time that it was produced, people who like it over the years, are not liking it in a conservative way, right? The film was released in 1975. The stage play was released in London in 1973. And at that time, society was far, far less tolerant of LGBT folks, of trans folks, etc. And people went to see this musical and this film largely because it had gay sex in it, because it had, trans and, cross-dressing folks in it. People saw that, and people were going to it because of that. People liked it in a very liberal, open-minded way. I understand that. There's actually an interesting tradition. I don't know if people have ever heard of this, but back in the time before there was television, it used to be, there was a lot of live entertainment. There'd be carnivals that would travel from town to town. They had vaudeville theater. And if you look into U.S. history, one thing they used to have in the United States is they used to have what were called sex shows. And what they were was that, this was, we used to have a lot stricter laws around pornography and strip dancing and stuff like that. They used to be very strict about that kind of thing. So there used to be one thing that people would do to make money is they would put on a sex show. And there would be a doctor, usually, a doctor who would give a lecture on the danger of sexually transmitted diseases and the dangers of teen pregnancies and, the facts of life, etc. And he would put on this show, and it would be all urging you not to have sex outside of marriage and to be a good, wholesome, person. But while he was giving this presentation, he would have several scantily clad, beautiful nurses assisting him in putting up slides. He'd have very racy pictures of genitals to show you things. And the whole thing was titillating his audience. And the audience was full of men who were there to be aroused. But he was up there giving a lecture about morality. And that was a thing that happened. And a lot of things in U.S. society are like that. And as much as we are now much more liberal and open as a society, we still have a big part of this. When we've talked about Fox News, we'll have those scantily clad, beautiful anchors, talking about how there's, we need social restraint, and that this is a weird thing. It's part of the human mind. We want what we're being told not to have. Right? We want to crave something that's forbidden. We want to be hungry and then eat. We want to be thirsty and then drink. And that this is part of the way human desires work. They talk about forbidden fruit. When we're told something is bad, we want it more. And that this is part of the psychological game we human beings play. And that's a way you can kind of understand these things. People were going to see Rocky Horror Picture Show because they wanted to see drag queens, they wanted to see gay sex, they wanted to see something about sexual freedom and liberation. But at the essence of what the play is about, if you actually read what it's about, what the play or the film is saying, it's quite conservative in its essence. And I first came across this work of art as a teenager. I remember my parents didn't want me to watch the movie, so I remember I got on the internet and I read the screenplay. And so, I devoured it first as a screenplay. And so because I was reading the words of it, not just watching people dancing on a screen, I guess I engaged with the content a little more. And over the years, of course, I've seen the movie, seen the play, etc. I've thought about it a lot, and now that it's Halloween time, I want to give you my overall political analysis. What is this work of art saying? And at the end of the day, I would say the Rocky Horror Picture Show, the Rocky Horror Show, the musical, is profoundly conservative. And I will go over why that is. All right, so the film starts out. For those of you who haven't seen the film, I will narrate what happens while pointing to the political message of what goes on. So the film starts out, there's this couple, Brad and Janet, and they are nerdy, right? They are a nerdy couple, and they are at a wedding, and as the wedding is ending, Brad proposes to Janet, says, "Will you marry me?" She says yes, and they're so excited that they're going to get married. And so they start driving through the countryside, so excited about this marriage that's about to happen, and then their car breaks down in the middle of a thunderstorm. And their car breaks down in the middle of a thunderstorm. And so they're kind of trapped. And their car breaks down in the middle of a thunderstorm. And they end up going to a nearby castle in order to find help. They get to the castle, and the castle, they find out, is headed up by a drag queen by the name of Frank-N-Furter, right? An allusion to Dr. Frankenstein. So they get to this castle run by this drag queen. And they see him singing and dancing, and they don't quite know what to make of his castle. There's a number of gender non-conforming guests who are doing bizarre dances, etc. So as soon as they get to this castle, they find out it's a very special night because the drag queen who runs the castle is going to announce that he's created a human being. He's pulled a Dr. Frankenstein. He's created a human being. So the couple, they get to the castle. They're looking for help or whatever. They're separated from each other. Then the drag queen proceeds to seduce both the man and the woman, and they both are seduced separately. He seduces the man separately, and he seduces the woman separately. And they both find out about this and feel profoundly betrayed by this. They both feel shocked that their partner would cheat on them and would, etc. They both feel very betrayed by this. The Frankenfurter character proceeds to from there. They one of his former lovers breaks out of what is it, like an ice chest or a freezer where he's been keeping him, he's basically put one of his former lovers, a motorcycle guy, into a freezer that he's put into a freezer. Well, the guy breaks out of the freezer, and then Dr. Frankenfurter murders him in front of everyone with an ice pick. He murders him and kills him. And then they proceed to make this person from the dead. They create a new human being. They create a new human being, and the couple are having drama between the two of them. They obviously can't get along. And at one point, then the Dr. Frankenfurter character becomes angry at the woman, at Janet, proceeds to start yelling at her. At which point, the Dr. Frankenfurter, freezes all of them, and he makes them all into statues. He then breaks them out of being statues for some kind of bizarre floor show, which is the climax of the piece. There's this big floor show, this big artistic performance, at the end of which the servants of Dr. Frankenfurter, of the drag queen, then rise up and seize control, and it turns out they're aliens, and they go back to another planet. And if you look at the whole thing, all throughout the piece, you find condemnations of the main character. The main character, Dr. Frankenfurter, who's the hero of the whole thing, is clearly the villain, and he is associated with evil, and he's associated with living a sexually free lifestyle. And that is abundantly clear. And in fact, many people look at the film in particular and feel like the Dr. Frankenfurter character is probably intended to represent the Greek deity Dionysus, the cult of Dionysus. The cult of Dionysus in ancient Greece, you had Dionysus, which was the god of wine and pleasure. They used to have orgies, big drunken sex parties to worship Dionysus. And it's pretty clear that Dr. Frankenfurter is supposed to be Dionysus. And during the climax of his floor show, he begins, he sings to the audience. He says, "Give yourself over to absolute pleasure. Swim the warm waters of sins of the flesh, erotic nightmares beyond any measure, and sensual daydreams to treasure forever. Don't dream it, be it." He's basically urging the audience to live out their deepest sexual fantasies. And as he says that, this is supposed to be an evil person. He's a murderer. Not only does he kill someone else at one point, I think he's a cannibal at one point. You see him eating his former lover, who he's killed. And we're supposed to associate this hedonism with a cruel indifference to other people. And that's how he comes across as a character, that he's obsessed with his own sexual pleasure to the point that he preys on other people, that he kills other people, he murders other people. And that comes across as you look at the piece. The main character, who is the symbol of sexual freedom, is also the symbol of cruelty and indifference to others and sadism. and violence, and the link between sex and violence, the link between cruelty and indifference to others and pursuing one's own pleasure is made over and over again throughout the piece. Dr. Frankenfurter is supposed to be evil, and he's also supposed to be the symbol of sexual liberation. Meanwhile, a big part of what Dr. Frankenfurter seems to be doing is he's trying to corrupt human beings, right? He's made his own human being at one point. He makes his own character, right? He makes his own creature, right? That he makes, a human being, simply for his own sexual pleasure. He's trying to convince Brad and Janet, this normal couple, to become sexually liberatory like him. And that he's trying to change human beings. He's from some other planet, but he's trying to change human beings. That is a recurring theme from the piece. At one point, during the climactic floor show, the big, strong, sexy man that he's made in his laboratory, his monster or whatever, he says something like, "I'm just 7 hours old, truly beautiful to behold, but somebody should be told my libido hasn't been controlled. The only thing I've come to trust is an orgasmic rush of lust." He's created this human being out of nothing, like Dr. Frankenstein or whatever. He's created him to be nothing but a creature that craves nothing but sexual pleasure. And so he does that. He also is trying to corrupt Brad and Janet against each other, trying to tear apart their relationship, trying to get both of them to live more sexually open lifestyles. At one point, there's an allusion to LSD. During that floor show, the Janet character says, she says, what does it say? My ways have been disbanded, my mind has been expanded, it's the gas that Frankie's landed, his lust is so sincere. That's a reference to drug use. That's a reference to drug use, accompanying drug use. Mind has been expanded, expanding your mind, that was a euphemism for LSD at the time. And, give yourself over to absolute pleasure. All of this is, Frankenfurter is supposed to represent the cult of Dionysus. The cult of Dionysus that he represents is trying to corrupt average people. Average people, right? Brad and Janet are supposed to be this average, normal couple. Eddie, the monster he creates is just this thing he's creating. He's trying to remold human beings into being pleasure-centered creatures without any moral compass, like he is. He's a sociopath. He murders people. He preys on people. And he's trying to reinvent other people to be like him. But they reject him, right? They reject him. There's one moment where he's trying to sexually assault Janet. He's yelling at her for being, he's yelling at her for being too prudish, not being sexually liberal like him. And it seems like the entire cast seems united against him. They all start condemning him, saying, "You're a hot dog, but you better not try to hurt her." And it seems like everyone is kind of rejecting him. As much as he's trying to reinvent people to be like him, to be sociopathic and to be pursuing only their own pleasure, it doesn't work. They're all rejecting him in unison, and that seems to be a theme of it. So then, right, the floor show, the climax of it, after he gives his "give yourself over to absolute pleasure," right, new left, right, after he does that, then it's his servants who rise up and remove him, right? The riffraff character walks on, Frankenfurter, it's all over. Your mission's a failure. Your lifestyle's too extreme. I'm your new commander. You are now my prisoner. I mean, and that character riffraff, who is the servant of this hedonistic drag queen, what is his name? His name is Riffraff. What is riffraff? That's the slang of the British aristocracy for the poor, for the common folk, for the working class. That's the name of the character. And it's also worth noting that the author of the Rocky Horror Picture Show, Richard O'Brien, in the movie and in the stage play, played the character of Riffraff. And Riffraff is this, he's the one who ultimately ends it, right? The servants rise up and overthrow the decadent, sociopathic, rich man, basically. And so the servants rise up and overthrow the decadent, sociopathic rich man. That is how the piece ends, right? And so then, the aliens go to another planet, the castle disappears. But the final words of the piece, the very final words of the Rocky Horror Picture Show, the last line from the narrator, again, is really saying something. The last line of the Rocky Horror Picture Show goes like this. The narrator says, "And crawling on the planet's face, some insects called the human race, lost in time and lost in space and meaning." So this is basically an expression of postmodernism. There is no truth. There is no meaning. Human beings are just kind of animals. There is no point to life. And Brad and Janet are just kind of left there in this crater. The castle that they've gone to just zaps away into outer space or whatever. And they're left there and confused about what is true and what is not true. Right? You have to remember, so when was the time this was produced? This is 1973, right? During the film version, they made a point of having Nixon's resignation in the film, like the audio recording of Richard Nixon's resignation from the presidency in the film. And it's supposed to be a symbol for the cultural confusion that followed the 1960s, late 70s political upsurge. And at the time, allegories to the fall of Rome were very widespread. Richard Nixon, who they have audio of him recording, there's a famous recording you can probably find online of Richard Nixon, was very, very upset. Was very, very upset about the fact that the TV program All in the Family had a gay couple on it. Richard Nixon was furious about it. And if you listen to Richard Nixon, this audio recording, he says, "Oh my God, this is the breakdown of a civilization. Don't you know that the last 5 emperors of Rome were a bunch of fags?" And he thinks that homosexuality destroyed the Roman Empire. And that this was a recurring theme with the right wing at the time, right? The 1960s right wing was saying the hippies, the hippies, they're all, this is a civilization in decline, cultural decadence, sex, drugs, and rock and roll is a sign that America is ending. We have to stop this or else it's going to tear apart our whole civilization. That's a theme. So, that's a theme. And then so you have the cult of Dionysus, basically, trying to seduce this good, wholesome American couple and failing. And then you have the workers, the servants of Dr. Frankenfurter rising up and overthrowing him because his lifestyle's too extreme. This is a profoundly right-wing piece, and it's associating, the most profoundly right-wing part about it is it's associating sexual liberation with sociopathy and with indifference toward other people, with violence and with cruelty. That's one of the main points of the piece, right? You are to associate sexual liberation with raping other people, with murdering other people, with eating other people. That's one thing. The second thing is that you are also supposed to associate working class people with fighting for morality against the decadent rich. Right, that's definitely a socially conservative message. In addition to that, it leaves the way the piece ends, it ultimately ends with this postmodern bemoaning of moral confusion, that all truth has been stripped away. What is the truth? And that's kind of what it's bemoaning moral confusion. It's basically saying we were better off when we knew what right and wrong were. That's basically the message of the Rocky Horror Picture Show. It is portraying the sex, drugs, and rock and roll of the 1960s as having a negative effect of leading in a dangerous place. And at one point, there's a whole song about this Eddie character, this previous lover of Dr. Frankenfurter who's died. And the whole piece is about how this was a young man who got in with a bad crowd and turned into a bad bad person, right? And he got in. I mean, if you listen to it, it's just, they're condemning him for being a biker. When Eddie said he didn't like his Teddy, you knew he was a no good kid. But then he threatened your life with a switchblade knife. And it's the tragedy of a young man being corrupted. At one point, what is it? There's something about there's a section that is condemning, I believe, the kind of the way a lot of drug addicts work. What is it? Right? It was great when it all began. I was a regular Frankie fan, but it was over when he had the plan to start working on a muscle man. Now, the only thing that brings me hope is my love for a certain dope. I mean, this is about how ultimately, yes, becoming a drug addict feels very fun and exciting, but pretty soon you become an addict and you become dependent on it. I mean, it's all arguing. The whole point of the piece is basically that the lifestyle that the piece is kind of celebrating, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, partying, the cult of Dionysus doesn't lead to happiness. That's the point. That's the point of the piece. It's profoundly socially conservative. It's Richard Nixon saying, "Oh my God, the last 5 emperors of Rome were gay." That's basically what the piece is saying, and it's kind of odd, but it's kind of like one of those sex shows, right, that I talked about. All those men who used to go to the carnival sex shows throughout the United States, they weren't there to support good morals. They were there to get turned on, right? And it's interesting because one thing I find kind of profound or kind of interesting, I guess, is that Rocky Horror Picture Show, it was filmed at a studio called Bray Studios in Britain. Bray Studios. It's where they filmed a lot of movies. That's also where they filmed the Hammer horror films, right? The films with Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing. Those 1960s horror, Dracula, Frankenstein. They were all filmed at this studio called Bray Studios. It was, they had a castle soundstage, basically. What's interesting about that is that the critique that a lot of people had of those Hammer horror films is that many people watched those films, right? The Curse of Frankenstein, the horror of Dracula, Dracula's Risen from the Grave, Taste the Blood of Dracula. Many people have watched those films, and they say, okay, the films, they have a lot of sex in them. At the time, they were widely criticized for having so much sex in them. They have a lot of violence in them, a lot more gore than people were used to in movies. But they're still, quote-unquote, moralizing, right? They're still trying to give you a lecture on right and wrong. They're trying to teach you morals, right? And that's a critique that a lot of modern horror fans have of those films, is right? That it's about good and evil. It's trying to get you to to stand for good against evil. Often the main character in one of those films is somebody who is a good person but has done something bad, and then doing something bad leads to a bunch of bad consequences, and then luckily they see the error of their ways and they're able to escape those bad consequences while learning kind of a moralizing lesson. It's a lot of those films. A lot of those films are like that. And that people find them to be moralizing. But at the same time, people were going to see Christopher Lee as Dracula, Peter Cushing as Frankenstein. They were going to see it not because they wanted a morality tale, because they wanted to see the violence. They wanted to see the sex. And it's the same kind of thing with Rocky Horror Picture Show. Rocky Horror Picture Show, in essence, is giving you a morality lecture. It's saying that sex, drugs, and rock and roll is going to lead you toward destruction and moral confusion, and it's not a good way to be, and it's associated with evil. But at the same time, everyone was going to see Rocky Horror Picture Show because they wanted the gay sex, they wanted the drag queens, they wanted the rock music, they wanted to celebrate that. So it's a weird kind of thing, and that may have been what made it appeal, right? It's like it's this whole thing. We want, to really enjoy eating, you have to be hungry first, right? To really enjoy drinking, you have to be thirsty first. And it's this weird kind of Freudian game that our mind plays, where we want to be told no. We want to pursue something and be told it's wrong at the same time. And that's what the film is doing. It's giving you a morality lecture while letting you see the rock and roll and the sex that you're there to see, right? It's condemning something while using it to appeal to you. It's a very bizarre psychological game, but at the end of the day, I would maintain that the message of the film, if you look at what is being said in the film, right, the way Brad and Janet, right, are being corrupted, but then, the big climax of the moment is when, Brad stands up for Janet, against Dr. Frankenfurter, even though their marriage or their relationship is ruined, and everyone, they all start condemning Dr. Frankenfurter, saying you're a hot dog, but you better not try to hurt her. That's like the whole cast of the play is basically ganging up on Frankenfurter and saying you're an evil person, and that's like the climactic moment. Right, and that's a condemnation of the character, right? And he's a villain, right? And the other thing is that Dr. Frankenfurter is really the star of the whole thing. He's almost like a Macbeth, right? He's an anti-hero, right? He's an evil person who's the center of the whole thing. I mean, he is the main character if there ever was one. It's about him. But he is supposed to be an evil person, and ultimately, his evil destroys him. And that's kind of the message. It's like your evil will destroy you. And associating sexual liberation with indifference to other people, with cruelty to other people, with selfishness, with the downward spiral of drug addiction, then arguing that average working class people are gonna rise up to crush the decadence of the rich. Bemoaning the moral confusion, that last line in the film, crawling on the planet's face, some insects called the human race, lost in time, lost in space, and meaning, and then the chorus says meaning, and that's the end of the movie, right? It's very conservative. It is an extremely right-wing piece. I mean, the fact that they did so much to convince you to link the drag queen, murderous psychopath, protagonist of the piece, to link him with, with the cult of Dionysus at a time there was widespread discussion about ancient Rome. The fact that they put Richard Nixon's resignation in the film, and Richard Nixon's supporters were constantly condemning the hippies and comparing the USA to the fall of Rome, the empire in decline. I mean, this was, the more you look at the piece, the fact that the author played riffraff and assigned himself to play the role of the socially conservative working class person, the riffraff rising up to stop the decadence of the rich, the more you look into it, this is a very conservative piece of writing. It's a very, very conservative piece, and that's my analysis of the Rocky Horror Picture Show. What do folks think? Am I wrong? Am I right? I mean, what do folks think? That's my analysis. Happy Halloween, by the way. I thought for Halloween I'd give you my analysis of the Rocky Horror Picture Show, and that is my analysis. I read it as profoundly socially conservative. I see it as a work of social conservatism. Jenny Lynn says I'm spot on. President Jesus says he's never thought of it before. Marilyn says I'm dead wrong, right? I'll admit I've never seen it, says someone else. But there you go. There you go. Happy Halloween. That was really interesting. Gave me a lot to think about. It says E. Okay, very good. I've never seen the movie, but enjoyed the talk. Oh, okay. Well, watch the movie yourself and tell me what you think, because that's what I take from it. I'm just being honest with you. I see it as a morality tale. I see it as an attack on the rich for not being socially conservative enough. I see it as bemoaning moral and confusion. Millennial Splaining, who's got a great channel. You should check out Millennial Splaining's channel. Bess says, excellent point, is the author self-hating gay? The author, I believe, describes himself as transgender now. I don't know much about the author, but he's definitely not a social conservative. But the piece reads to me like social conservatism. But perhaps that was the art of it. Perhaps he was trying to write a Hammer horror film, right? Perhaps he was ironically writing a morality tale that he didn't really believe in. I don't know if he wrote it that way to be in the style of one of these horror movies that's giving you a morality lecture. Perhaps that's what it was. But if you look at it, it ends in a very kind of dark, sad way. That's the way it ends, bemoaning moral confusion, bemoaning postmodernism and the lack of a clear, coherent narrative, the decline of ideology. It ends with kind of extreme social conservatism. There's many aspects of it you could dig into. There's a character in the film I didn't even mention before, who is called Dr. Scott, and he's like a friend of Brad and Janet's, he's supposed to be a scientist. And at one point, they allude to the fact that he's a Nazi, Dr. Scott, and he says, don't you mean Dr. Von Scott or something like that? It's like he's supposed to be a Nazi, basically. Brad and Janet, they have this Nazi friend of theirs, Dr. Scott, who's in a wheelchair, and he's supposed to be like a Nazi or something like that. It's weird, and he's resisting. At one point, he says, what is it? What does he say? He says, what is it? I must be strong and try to hang on before this decadence saps our wills, right? It's basically it's bizarre, right? So if Brad and Janet are the heroes and Frankenfurter is evil and their friend is a Nazi in a wheelchair, it's really, really, so the Nazi's the good guy, or is he the good guy, right? And it leaves you in this morally ambiguous place, but then it bemoans morality, right? It bemoans the lack of morality, right? The fact that they don't know what's right and wrong. That's the real horror, is that it ends with Brad and Janet, sitting there in a crater as this castle that they're in has just zapped and disappeared, and they don't know what's right and wrong anymore. And it's this depressed, confused place where they don't know what to believe in. They've kind of lost their values, so there you go. Caleb, don't scare people, please. I am your follower. We are not too bad because government signed up with terrorist group. Well, I don't even know what that means, Syed. I don't even know what you're talking about, but there you go. That's my take on the Rocky Horror Picture Show. That's my take on it. I see it as a profoundly conservative work of art that people appreciated for the opposite of what the actual text of it says. So based on that, let's do the roll call. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who's with us? Names and locations. I will call you out as I see you. Then we'll answer your questions, and then we'll be done for now. And then I'll be back later tonight, probably around 11. I'll be back on.